Christianity exists pre-19th century without the mass publication of the Bible. How can you do that? You see, today a lot of people is spoiled because they got the internet. You got a lot of information available right in at your fingertips. You can go right on your phone, look it up on Google. You can look it up on AI. You got a library right around the corner. You got 2, 3 libraries in vicinity to your home. You got a library at your school. You got bookstores everywhere. So this is a highly literate society today. It's a highly literate society, but that's only in today's world. If you didn't have the Bible, you wouldn't even, how could you even know what the Bible said unless it was produced, it was published? And so a lot of people believe that the Christianity before the mass publication of the Bible is the same Christianity of today, which it is not. The majority of people today can go get some people got, man, 10, 15 different Bibles on their shelf. They got 10, 15 different Bibles on their shelf. I know personally, I got that many. Just, various versions of the Bible. You could go look it up for yourself. You can go look up every book, every chapter. You can even get the lost books of the Bible. You feel what I'm saying? You can even get the laws, what they call the apocrypha. You can get all of that. It's available for you. But 1900s and majority of people was out here trying to survive. Most motherfuckers was out in the fields and shit. They didn't read and write. These motherfuckers was out there agriculturalists and shit like that. They was out, yeah. And you hit it right on the head, Ray. It's still available. And motherfuckers don't even, because they don't even know how to use their mind to access it. Only through great teachers like the Dr. Ben, the Dr. John Henry Clark, the Chancellor Williams, the Walter Williams, the J.A. Rogers, and all of these that tell us to go look it up, do the research, and teach us how to research. And that's what is very important about the Pan African community. Our teachers always told us to do the research for yourself. Don't believe shit I say. Go look it up. Prove me wrong. You see what I'm saying? And that's the glory in that. And so, again, talking about, and I want to keep reiterating this so you can see that the world that we know today only exists in the 1900s. You see? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can't believe nothing. You can't believe nothing. You got to look it up. You got to look it up. It ain't about believing. If you just believe, you like a Christian. You like a Muslim. You like a Jew. Hebrew nigga that just believe. But not about believing. It's about knowing, and knowledge. Knowledge. And so you got to know, and that means go look it up for yourself. And so I proved Walter Williams. You see, I proved it to myself when I started, and I had always been looking up, you know, uh, 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 you know, that's the first. But I don't, I would look up the oldest copy. But see, the first thing, I the one that instituted, was it mass produced? See, that's what I added. A lot of people ask, what is that's not enough. Was it mass produced? It's something different because one book could be fraudulent. If it was mass produced, meaning it was produced into the thousands and tens of thousands, then you got too many eyewitnesses of that account. You got tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of eyewitnesses who read the literature. But if you just got one fucking book, it could be a fraud. You know what I'm saying? And so that's key. So I always go and ask the question, was it mass produced? They don't have no mass production of literature into the 19th century on that, because you're not going to produce literature for an ignorant ass population that is illiterate. There is no school system. There is no school system yet. And so they had to create the school system and then educate the European population and then mass produce books. You know what I'm saying? They had to start A, B, C, D, E, F, G with they ass, even in the 1900s. When you talk about motherfuckers out there in the wild, wild west, they was out there riding on horseback. They was out there in the fields. They was out there doing shit, agriculturalists, things, and out there with cattle and shit. Cowboys out there, and they ain't out there with no goddamn books. So even in the early 1900s, a large percentage of the American population was still illiterate. Okay. So I just want y'all to understand that the world of literacy, y'all got to understand that this world that we in today is really, you talking about after the 40s, after the 40s, and in 50s, and maybe 40s, 50s, where you start getting where people's got where black people that got libraries. My grandfather was the first man I know that had a library. You know what I'm saying? Now, who would have had great, when I look at pictures of my great grandparents and shit, they look like they was agriculturalists, that they was out in the field. I'm not saying they didn't have a book here and there, but did they have libraries? So you got to use, that don't mean, they didn't have a book here and there. You know what I'm saying? But over here, black people was being killed for damn reading. So it took us a while to get into the literacy where we had libraries. Not that somebody couldn't, but that they could possess a book that didn't require them to lose their life if they was found with that book. You feel what I'm saying? So I want people to understand that the world of Christianity that y'all know today is only in this world where you could go and get a Bible and refute the preacher. In many instances, pre-19th century, the preacher didn't even have the Bible. Yeah, Walter Williams saying that they was, what the term is, it's when you freestyle. You know what I'm saying? You freestyle some shit you heard from another person, and that's not. It's called. It's what was it? What I get it. He used the word, and I don't want to mispronounce the word or whatever. But what it means is to freestyle some shit. You make it up as you go. They did not have a Bible in their hand, so that shit was not standardized. Meaning you could have various, all type of damn stories about Noah, about, they didn't have a book where they could read straight from chapter and verse. That's key. That's fucking key. Now, when you skip, and when you ain't sitting in class, and you got to have a book. You got to have a book. If you in college, you got to have a book. Imagine being in class and you didn't have the book. You gonna be behind like a motherfucker. You gonna fail. You gonna motherfucking fail. You see what I'm saying? That's right. But you got to motherfucking be able to put it in your hand to do either. You got to be able to put that motherfucker. So I'm not even discussing really the studying or the researching of the book. I'm telling people that you can't even read the motherfucker if you don't have literacy. And literacy means mass publication of the book. That come before any studying, researching, or whatever. And what I'm stating is that they did not have literacy in the 19th century, and that alone should tell you something. You see what I'm saying? Because the Bible is supposed to be thousands of years old. How is it it could be that old and you just got mass production of the book damn near in the 19th century? Make me believe this shit, man. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, yeah. Even if that's what I'm trying to tell you. You see, so the majority of this shit that you got today is made up after Gutenberg. See, the thing is with that printing press, you see, that gave them a lot of ability to just create whatever they wanted because they didn't have no books before the printing press. So when they started writing them books and creating them books and putting them they didn't have no dating system. If they didn't have public, how could you have a chronology without publication of literature? What did you write it on? You didn't even have a calendar. You see what I'm saying? So when they start making up them history books and all of that, they were putting in dates that they just made up off the top of their motherfucking head. You see what I'm saying? And so it was the Germans that created history. So they did come to a standardization. Okay, we gonna get these particular authors, these dates, and so on and so forth. And so yes, in Germany is where the first standard of history, a history class was taught. What we on today is from that same German. I believe it was the University of Berlin. It was, and it's called the German historical method, where they supposedly is evidence primary approach. A lot of that shit prior to that was biblical and all of that, but evidence primary approach. What we using today, you got to prove it, and this, that, and the third. So that came under the at the university, and I got a video on that. The German historical method. Okay, which was all which ain't really German because we primary evidence long before the German. Before that, they just used the Bible. Okay, you can look that up, and that was in the late 1800s. Okay, that was in the late, and you can look it up. If you look it up on AI, just look up German historical method, and you will see that that's the first time when the universe history was taught as a class in the structure of what we know of today, America, Europe, Canada. It's the German historical method, and Berlin, the University of Berlin, uh, created that method, which already was in existence in Africa long before the German, but they had to create a system for themselves. So they just started teaching history on evidence historical base in the 1800s. So they lying about the chronologies. How in the fuck you gonna start that late 1800s and you dating shit back in the BC era and you ain't got no documentation or nothing? You just making shit up. So they figure at that point they got the printing press. They starting to come into some understanding of structure. You see, and that's when they put dates on all this shit out here. And people think this shit is from some ancient dating system, and this shit was just made up in the 1800s and the 1900s. Y'all niggas better wake up. Y'all better wake up. Anyway, family, click that link. We're talking about the European. We're not talking about the African. You coming in here too late. We're talking about the Bible. Okay? We're talking about the Bible. It was not mass produced anyway. Even if you go prior to the printing press. Don't come in here late. Leave them in there. We already talked about the African was already literate in the 3000 BC. We talking about the European. You must be a European. You came in here too late. You came in here too late. Didn't get an understanding until the 1900s. Basic. They didn't get no structure until the 1900s. Anyway, don't come in here late. whatever your name is, Joshua Thompson. We talking about the European. We're not talking about the African. Anyway, come black. We ain't done. Make sure y'all get over there, Patreon. General Seti. Also, kingseti.com. General Seti, Etsy, one stop. We got that fire over there. We just getting started. Come on back. Bring your Bible. Get your Bible. Matter of fact, I got some dates here I didn't touch, but I will touch on the next video. See y'all in a minute. Boom. Black power.